Hey everybody, welcome to this week's Q&As. It's early Friday morning, so this is going to be late getting out to everybody, but let's jump in and see what we got. First up, Shin just watched Marco's Downscaling Chronicles episode on the UVC with line blending and wants to know if I think line blending has its use. Would it have its niche use on the RetroTink 5X, 4K, or other newish FPGA-based scalers? Did I say niche right? Don't I always say it that way? Correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm obviously terrible at this stuff, but I always make efforts. But to answer your question, I think all of this stuff has its particular use case, and I think Marco does a really great job in that series showing where it has its advantages, but all of these different things are really on a per game basis. Now, with consoles that mostly have the same style games, so like the Sega Genesis, for example, doesn't really have 480i games, so there's generally one type of downscaling you would want, especially because it's mostly 2D graphics, not 3D graphics and stuff like that. So that's one of those things where case by case basis on how you should be downscaling, and Marco gives everybody all the info you'd need to decide for yourself. So, do I think it has its place in any newer scalers? Sure, absolutely, if the developer has time to add it. And I mean that with love to everybody. It's just that, like, Marcus did a phenomenal job in the OSSC Pro, and it is pretty much the top downscaler these days. But I wouldn't ask Marcus to stop what he was doing and add that feature unless it was something he was already interested in doing, or if it had a really specific use case that would fix a problem. So if it's a case of one type of downscaling might work a little better than the other in this case, then whatever. But if it's something like, these games are only playable with this type of downscaling, then sure, I would reach out. But it's just one of those things where a lot of this technology, especially stuff like the UVC, was made at a time where they were just trying to solve a problem. Hey, it's getting harder to find arcade monitors. Let's grab a bunch of other displays, jam them in our arcade machines, and we just need a converter box to make it work. And they did really good jobs with that. So, I know my answer is kind of a cop-out, but it's one of those things where there really is no solid answer. So thanks for the question, though, Shin. Hopefully I was at least able to shine some light on it. Next up, Adam Amp bought one of those Unico 4x3 LCD arcade monitors last year and didn't even take it out of the box yet. They want to know if there's any updates for it because it turned out to be pretty disappointing. And I don't know of any. Now, that doesn't mean it didn't happen. It just, Todd was the one who did the original post breaking down everything that was wrong with it. And I don't believe he did a follow-up post. Maybe he did, and I'm just half asleep today, and my apologies. But if there were any fixes for it, I certainly didn't hear about it. And I did hear different rumors of them coming out with a different monitor. So maybe the fixes are going to be a new display, but I'm guessing. I do not know. So if anybody in the comments knows or owns one of these and could have some feedback for us, please let us know. And just please remember that YouTube deletes links in almost every comment. So if you end up trying to post it, it'll just get deleted. It won't even show up in my held for review bin. So just type like a description, like, yes, go to Unico's website, or no, there isn't, or whatever. But yeah, sorry, Adam. Next up, Tony Shadwick wanted to chime in on the conversation from last week about an Intellivision to USB adapter, so that way you could use it on the Indy cores and for FPGA gaming and stuff like that for a more accurate experience. And Tony said the 2600 adapter works on just about any DB9 controller types, including Intellivision. Unfortunately, I went to the website and it said that they're no longer being sold. I'll leave a link anyway. Maybe I misread or something, but that's pretty cool though, because that does mean that any Atari 2600 USB adapter might work with this, especially with the number pad and everything else. So thank you for the suggestion, Tony. And does anybody know of one that's out now that definitely works? Maybe even the ones from Mick Guyver, the Damon Vite adapters, maybe those work. I don't know, but I just don't have any experience with that. So let me know in the comments if you have any others that work. And if not, maybe you could find an extra 2600 adapter. Next up, Captain Retro wanted to follow up on their problem that they were having with the twin Famicom. They had done an RGB mod as well as a mod to get Famicom expansion audio, but they weren't able to get everything properly routed through the Nintendo multi-out. And I guessed that pulling audio from the RCA jack would work, and a bunch of people in the comments said, yes, it definitely does. And Captain Retro confirmed they did that, and they're happy to say both expansion and FDS audio are working now. So that's great. I really appreciate that you followed back back up as well, because you never know with stuff like this. It could have been that some other board revisions would work perfectly with that, and others might introduce something else. So the fact that you and others are all confirming that it works means that probably 99.9% chance that's just the way to do it in all of the installations. So really happy to hear that everything's up and running, Captain Retro. Thanks to everybody else who jumped in on that one as well to let us know. And yeah, it's a cool and easy fix. Next up, Dustin Madison has a New York City question. They want to know about a lot of stereotypes around New York City. Are you trying to get me canceled? Come on, you're not allowed to talk about this stuff anymore. You get canceled for even saying the word stereotype. But all of my stupid jokes aside, of course, there's accents everywhere in all different parts of the country. And in fact, there's accents in different parts of the cities, depending on what city you're living in. But the one stereotype that I definitely found to not be true, but could be very easily interpreted as right, is the rude New Yorkers. And that's just not true at all. But I completely understand how people who come from much more laid back cultures might interpret the walking really fast, don't stop to smell the roses, just go. I don't want to stop in the middle of a store to have a random conversation for the most part. I mean, I'm talking in generalizations, which is also not allowed anymore, but for the most part, if the one thing that I saw is there are people power walking down the street. And if you say, hi, nice day, they're just going to keep walking. Like, what are you trying to sell me? Get out of here. I don't want to. But if you stop and you say, hey, I'm lost, could you help me find? Most people absolutely will stop and help, and they'll be very polite about it. No chit chat. All right, over there. Yep. Okay. Yep. Around the corner. Bye. I got to go. And they'll run off. And I have seen that very often interpreted as rude, but especially living there, but even before, I've never interpreted it that way. I just always saw it as a bunch of people who have things to do, but yet they were still nice enough to stop and take time to help other people. So that's definitely the one that always stands out when people talk about stuff like, is everybody rude? Is everybody angry? And I never felt that way at all. It was just, leave me alone unless there's a reason, because I got something to do, which is very much me. Especially with random salesmen. I don't know why. I just always get so upset. Like, leave me alone. I do not come to your house and bother you. Don't come to mine. Don't walk up to me in a store. I'm in a store trying to buy something else. Don't sell me something that I'm not there to buy. So I get really annoyed with that. So I guess maybe I'm always a New Yorker at heart, even though I wasn't born in the state. But yeah, that's the one. That's definitely the one that stands out. But as far as other stereotypes, the other thing you got to remember is there's so many types of people that just doesn't apply at all in most cases, because you just have every type of person living there. So it's really hard to generalize any more than that. But yeah, I don't know. Any other questions? Fire away. Just try not to get me canceled. All right. Next up, Chip said, taking inspiration from Corey's room tour, they're wanting to set up their systems to be playable at a moment's notice. Who's Corey? No, kidding. Kidding. They're looking to use as little cables as possible. They're wondering if it would be ideal to use one RGB SCART cable between multiple systems. An example would be like their RGB modded NES, SNES, N64, and Virtual Boy, since they all could use the same multi-out RGB cable they got from Insurrection Industries. So if they were to make a multi-out splitter to connect all of those systems to the one cable, would this cause issues? So my short answer is yes, don't do that. But I'll explain why. So if you were talking about making a switch where you get multi-out to multi-out cables and you build a switch around that, and then you only have one of those cables going out, technically that would work, but the components in the cable would be too far away. And at that point, that's a lot of custom stuff. You would be much better off just buying a bunch of the same SCART cable and then buying a SCART switch. Now, if you're talking about wiring them all up just by I'm going to just say this to visualize it. I don't mean literally, but as if it were the same as you got a bunch of multi-out connectors and then twisted all the reds together, twisted all the blues together and connected those. That is definitely a bad idea, because you're still connecting the consoles together, sharing grounds, putting multiple loads on. And even if you don't power more than one console on at the same time, it's still not at all the right thing to do. And you could just blow out all of your consoles. So I definitely would not suggest doing that at all. Unfortunately, the only easy way to do that would be to get whatever is the easiest cable setup for you in order to do that. Now, you could have stuff like just getting an RGB SCART cable is probably the easiest because you have a bunch of different consoles that could all run through a SCART switch. So getting like the retro gaming cables 6-to-1, that's only one output, but it's cheap. You have 6 inputs, which covers your NES, SNES, N64, and Virtual Boy. So that's 4, so you get 2 more inputs for other things. So yeah, that's definitely what I would recommend. And if you're on a budget, you could just take that one cable and swap between them. But you specifically said you want all of your systems to be playable at a moment's notice. So the best way to do that on a budget is get good SCART cables. Don't cheap out, but just get whatever the less expensive one is. You don't need the triple shielded coax from some of those sellers. You could just get the Insurrection Industries one, which is excellent, and then plug those into a cheap switch and go from there. But if you really want it to be playable on a moment's notice, you got to get something with auto detection built in, which is going to be a much higher budget. You could still use the same cables, you just need to buy the more expensive switch. So, and in fact, I'm not talking down about anybody who sells ultra shielded cables. Those have their place, but generally speaking, people know when that's the right thing. You need a longer cable run. You're running it next to a ton of other cables with a lot of interference, and you don't always need to buy the super expensive ones. Just don't cheap out and get the no-name brand ones. Get ones from reputable resellers that we've all been verifying for years, and that's definitely the best way to go about it. So let me know if you have any other questions, but the short answer is no, don't do that, but hopefully I was able to explain it well enough for the longer answer. Next up, Demon Koo wants to know if I have any recommendations on a 5.1 surround speaker set that are magnetically shielded. They're trying to move their CRTs around, but their speakers have been limiting where they could put them. So I don't know of any sets that you could buy if you were looking for those like surround sound in a box sets. However, those Ascend acoustic bookshelves, the ones that I have there that I showed in that video, I still absolutely love and think for the money, they are amazing. I always say that with audio because you could spend $1 million on speakers, but if you compare it to other speakers at the same price point, they're either equal to or better than. I think the ELACs are a hair better, but the ELACs are not magnetically shielded. So I am very, very happy with this surround sound setup. I am especially happy with the price that I paid for it because I did spend, for me personally, a ton of money on this. But when it comes to audio setups, I spent nothing. When you compare it to like expensive high-end audio setups, this was nothing. And it doesn't sound like nothing. It sounds much more expensive than it is. So I love those speakers. You could try to find like older speaker sets and hope that they're shielded, but you would really want to try to find some way to double check. So it's one of those things where if you know anybody selling one that's 10 years old, or probably have to be more than that now, you'd probably have to find one that's very old. So I would just give it a try and see. I did list any other speakers that I knew of in that video, but there aren't many. There's basically none brand new. And there are no subwoofers that I know of that are, well, there's one. Ron, the Handlebar Gamer, bought one, but I think it was like $1,000 more than that for just the subwoofer. So you're going to have a hard time finding any new magnetically shielded sub. You might have to get used for that one. Now, circling back on that, is it viable to place your speakers high up in the corners of your gaming room for non-magnetically shielded speakers? My preference is double the distance from visible interference, which is still a guess, by the way. I've always been very, very open and blunt that is my guess with no science behind it whatsoever. But I would say that putting your speakers in the corners of the room should have zero effect on your CRTs, unless you have like a 5-foot tall ceiling or something, but it also isn't the greatest for audio. You want your speakers to be at ear level. So if it's one of those things where you have a TV that you like, but the speakers built in are total garbage and you just want some better speakers than that, sure, go for it. But just be aware that putting your speakers high up in the corners is not even close to the recommended placement for that. But it's definitely going to be better than junk speakers built into a flat panel, because even newer flat panels have much better speakers, but olders were terrible. So that would be fine. But having everything at ear level and every speaker at the same height makes a massive difference. And this is one of those things where that's not myth. Where you place your speakers isn't going to make me any money. So I'm not trying to sell you anything here. I'm just saying, and I don't have an affiliate link for Ascend acoustic speakers either, but it's just one of those things where if you ask people who are into audio, they'll tell you stories about when they tried to do it other ways, and they always go back to that. And the way my room is set up, there are a little off, but better, as good as they could be for this setup. And it's a noticeable difference from when I first connected it all, I just kind of threw all the speakers in, and when I'll get to it later, let me just make sure everything works. Let me try to figure out what's the best components. And then once I settled on everything, then I went back and re-leveled it. And yeah, it was a big difference. So totally feel free to do that. Put the speakers up in the corners. Just understand what you're doing when you do that. And I know audiophiles are going to want to reach through YouTube and punch me in the face for saying this, but I think it would also be totally acceptable if you took two Ascend acoustic speakers and a surround sound amplifier, and you put your two left and right speakers next to the CRTs, fully shielded, and then put any of the other ones up in the corners of the room, the rear surrounds and everything else. The Ascend Acoustics sells a center channel that's shielded as well. So I just mean the back speakers, because just like when I just talked about having them all at ear level is important, but most of the sound comes out of the front speakers. So if your choice was to only have three speakers, or to have three speakers and two rears way up in your back corners of your room, I'm all for that. I think it would be better than not having them at all. But audiophiles, chime in. I always listen to everything audiophiles tell me, knowing that a lot of it probably isn't true, but a lot of it is as well. And stuff like speaker placement is very important. But if you come in here telling me I have to spend $700 on a power cable, otherwise my stereo won't sound all right, I'm not going to listen to anything else you say. People might be wondering why I say stuff like that. Anybody who's into high-end audio is nodding their head right now, and everybody else is like, what the hell is Bob talking about? Don't even go down that rabbit hole. Well, that's it for this week. It was kind of a short one this week, but that works out because it was another nutty week for me. And unfortunately, I don't think it's going to slow down until like late November. So, just keep firing away for any Q&A question that you have, and just know that I might have to skip a week. So if that's the case, just whatever is the newest Q&A post, wherever it is that you support, just ask your question there. And I'm never going to just rush through these. I always want to take the time to answer a question as best I can. I love doing these from memory though, because I really want them to feel like you and I are hanging out somewhere together. So I make a bunch of mistakes, but I'd rather just wait and put some effort in than try to rush through it. So just for the next month or so, if I miss a Q&A, my apologies in advance, but feel free to ask absolutely any question you want. I just, I don't want to take the time to answer them unless I know I have the time to do it. I would never want to disrespect everybody and just skim through them or something like that. So anyway, as always, thank you all very much for participating, but also thank you for your support. I really appreciate it. And it really is what makes all of this stuff happen. So thank you all so much. And I will see you next week or the week after.